We begin today's recording by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are on. I am on Burrawang land. Where are you, Breezer?
I am on the land of the Djajarurrung people.
We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are tuning in today.
And wherever you're listening to the potty today, make sure you know whose land you're on. Join us each week for some booze-free banter about life without booze.
If you're entertaining cutting back your booze by a day, a week, a month, or for the rest of your life, we would love for you to tune in.
Buckle up and come along for a ride that may just change your life. If any of today's conversations have been triggering, please reach out to your local support centre in Australia. That is Lifeline 131114. All right, mate, so let's crack an Altina, shall we?
Crack an Altina. I've been completely piggy and drank them all, so...
Do you know what? I actually had an Altina last night. Had a friend over.
You?
Yeah. And she was having a wine, so I was like, oh, I'll rip out the Altina.
What'd you go for?
I had La Vie en Rose, which is my... Well, do you know what? That's what I had in the fridge, so I was like, I'll go with that. But there's obviously... more flavours. Head to their website, which is www.altinadrinks.com.
Yeah.
And what have the beautiful team at Altina given our listeners, mate? So
they have given a discount code of 10% off when they use the code BFB10. How good.
How good. And if you are tuning into our potty for the first time, Altina are our partner for the podcast and an alcohol-free wine, and we absolutely froth over them, don't we, mate?
So good, so good. Hence why I've got none left to even share on the pod today, because I mean, delish.
Yeah, so get around their website and, shop up a storm.
We love you, Altina.
Thanks, Altina. Meso!
How are ya?
I'm great. We have just been bantering with a pretty special person, haven't we, Meso?
Still on a bit of a high and still just...
Yeah. We were just, again, just in awe of everything he was saying. He is Joe Williams. So people may know him as he was an absolute superstar rugby league player. Then he had a career as a professional boxer. I actually crossed paths with Joe Meso because on, the SBS Insight show, there was a show about addiction, and Joe was actually interviewed on the program.
Yeah.
And I was like, Joe Williams. So I did a bit of a deep dive. And obviously, we're AFL chicks. So NRL to us is a little bit foreign. So I hadn't come across him through his sporting feats. But did a bit of a deep dive. And he's a lot more than a sports person. He does some incredible work around suicide prevention and wellbeing, but also trauma. He's really pivoted towards education around trauma, which he talks about in the potty, which was fascinating, wasn't it, Meso?
Oh, we were just hanging off every word he said.
Yeah.
Completely got lost in his words and his knowledge and the way that he delivers it. So, he speaks, people listen. He's found his purpose. This is his why.
Found his purpose. And he's been sober for 17 years.
Gave it a good nudge.
And then completely turned his life around, and is just as he says in the podcast, every day is a gift.
Oh, it really is. And he's talking about longevity now.
He's got some really powerful words to say, and I know, again, it's another longer ep, but do you know what? Joe had just so much to say, and it was all quality stuff. And there's nothing we could take out of this podcast because it was just pure gold, and we are so grateful for his time.
Oh, thanks.
So, thank you, Joe, and let's just get amongst it, shall we, Meso? What do you reckon?
Rip into it.
Joe Williams, let's get amongst it. A big, warm, booze-free bands welcome to our very special guest, Joe Williams. Joe, welcome.
How are we doing? Everything's well?
So good.
We are fabulous. Whereabouts are you actually, Joe? I didn't ask you off air.
Right now, sitting Wiradjuri country, a place called Dubbo, Western New South Wales. The beauty of living in the world of technology. We can do these sort of things from all over the world.
Amazing, isn't it?
Home, that's where home is at the moment. That's that's where my wardrobe is. A lot of the year I'm not home much.
Well, I'm in Djajarurrung country, which is central Victoria, Bendigo.
And I'm in Burrawang, which is in St Kilda, Melbourne. Yeah.
We've got all bases covered. We've got a bit of regional, bit of metro. Joe, we are going to get straight into it today. We do throw our guests straight into the deep end, and we give them opportunity to either share a shame story of you on the booze or a confession session. So both have a slightly different flavour. So it's up to you which one you would like to go for today.
I'm an open book with most things, and I think the beauty of I guess my drinking and drug days are a fair way behind me now. So, like, whilst we look at shameful stories and different things that we're a part of back in those days, for me it was a lifetime ago. I've been sober for 17 years now. So, who that person was then is very different to who the person is now. And a lot of that just comes with growth of who we are. And I guess the one thing that sobriety did for me was it took the blinkers off and just sort of, blinkers is probably not even the right word for it. It just took the haze away. Like I was wandering aimlessly through life with this haze because of different reasons that I was going through, different experiences that I was having, like challenges mentally and emotionally. And I was at the height of my sports career. So with a sports career also comes from different challenges with profile and the attention of things that probably aren't great for you in your life. So there's a fair few of them.
And I suppose as a sports person too, Joe, did you ever feel like you're sort of put on a pedestal and a little bit untouchable?
You know what? It's funny. Everyone says that. They put themselves on a pedestal, or society puts sports people on a pedestal. I think the expectation of what society is a bit of a pedestal, but without doubt for me, and I can't speak for anyone else, without doubt for me, it was the ego of what it was. I thought I was untouchable because I was this little whiz kid that was playing in the NRL, and I came into the grade at a time when we weren't winning. So and then we won a few games, which put the spotlight on who I was playing with at the time. And then I guess around about that time there was conversations around one of the biggest movie stars on the planet taking over the club. With Russell Crowe. So like it all sort of coincided with, I guess, those days of playing sport, but also the ego that comes with just being out there in the world of alcohol and drugs, add in money, add in profile. I will say that I'm thankful social media wasn't as prominent.
So are we.
Or camera phones, right? Oh wow,
I know, right? Well, I've had that conversation many a times with people just going, imagine if there was Snapchat around, we were at parties.
Oof, we would have been cancelled long ago.
Yeah, I think it's and like I said, for me that was such a long time ago. 6 months ago was a long time ago for me. In the fact of how we grow as people, right? We can either change or we stay the same. And I can honestly sit here and say that who I was then is nowhere near the guy who I am now. Nowhere near the dad I am now. Nowhere near the partner I am now. And I'm thankful for that. For the growth that I've done as an individual now, but also I'm also thankful for those times as well, because without going through those times, I wouldn't be who I am now. I wouldn't be able to share experiences around those sort of things as well. So I can never ever say that I regretted anything. There were 1 million times I could have made better decisions, but it's the experiences that we have in life that gives us the ability to learn and change.
Yeah, it's got you to where you are today.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Joe. Can you take us back to, I suppose, your earliest memory of booze? What was it like? Were you around booze growing up as a child? Can you paint us a picture there?
I think, what I will say about my family is that we're a family that was always involved with sport, right? So the old man played in the NRL, which was then called the Winfield Cup. And small town footy is, it's a big deal. Sunday afternoons is a big deal. So it was always like, I was always lucky that we had like my dad, whilst he was involved in the footy club and all that sort of thing, he was always training. Like, he was always flat out training with things. So I'd see him for weeks where he wouldn't touch anything. And then, again, not telling his story or anything like that. Then there was alcohol present around our family. I can honestly say that I've seen my mum drink twice in my 40 years, or almost 40 years. And so that was I guess it was some real leadership with that, but there was also some real safety around that as well, because we know that, parties and things like that can sometimes bring about challenging circumstances for young people. Won't say that I was ever put in those unpredictable times, but there are things that happen in communities that aren't particularly safe for young people because of the high amounts of alcohol that's around. So it was always present, but it wasn't as if the conversation that we need to have more as well is that what we think an alcoholic is. And we think that it's someone who, just drinks out of the silver pillow and is homeless, or someone who, rather than somebody that's problematic with their drinking, and trouble just follows them when they drink. For me, in the early days of me, I wasn't violent or anything like that. And there was experiences and circumstances where I remember as a kid, you're walking on eggshells, and that's not because of, it's because of the what might happen.
Yeah.
Is even just as terrifying for kids that I speak to today, in families that I speak to today, that's still relevant to their lifestyle. And I'm just so grateful that those days are long behind me, because, and it's not that again, I'm a violent person or anything like that, but when you're laying around after being out on a bender for a couple of days, and you've got tiny kids who just want the love and impact and affection off their parents, oftentimes parents can't give them that love and attention when they're coming down from a drug bender, right? So it's not a matter of being violent in that instance. It's a matter of just not wanting noise, not wanting light, not wanting things around you, and you take it out on everyone around you. That's what people don't understand, and that's the chaos that happens in family homes that people normalise as well, right? We don't talk about that enough. We normalise these things. Yeah. I stay out of Dad's room, stay out of Dad's way because he's just had a big night, and it's not right. It's not right for young people to be walking on eggshells in an unpredictable environment because of alcohol and drugs.
Yeah, and so neglect, isn't it, too? Neglect of a child.
That's a big word, right? But it's also a word that people don't like to sit with. But it's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Right? And neglect isn't about not loving or not caring for your kids. Neglect is about not attending to the needs of your kids. And the needs of your kids isn't particularly about how much you love them. The needs of your kids is based on the needs of a human being, the basic emotional, physical, and psychological needs as a young person.
Being present.
Yeah, that's
100%.
Such a powerful message there, Joe. It just made me go back to some times that I'm not so proud of as a mum and a single mum when I've had the kids under my care. And you can't take those moments back, but you can learn from them.
We can all learn from different experiences, and the challenge with our community is that, and this is community as abroad, is that every Monday we say we're not going to do it again, but then every Friday we're craving to get to finish work, to 5 o'clock hits, so we can have Friday over beers. You know what? I'm not going to do what I did last week. But how many times are we waking up on a Monday morning going, what happened?
Yeah.
And people slamming the doors around us because they're just sick of it. They're just sick of, and I love, and bit of disclosure, I've been in the rooms of AA for, 18 years. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
It's like, that's exactly what it is. And the people we take it out on too.
Yeah.
Are sick and tired of us being sick and tired because we're taking it out on everyone around us rather than looking at what's happening directly in front of us. Or our impact of what we're doing, right?
Lack of self-awareness, prioritising alcohol in your life and everyone, just that normalisation that we pencil in a hangover every Sunday and Monday, and the rest of the world just has to deal with it. Yeah, it's pretty rotten. So big, powerful words there, Joe. So can you tell... Sorry.
It's funny. I'll just touch on something, right? And sorry to cut you off.
No,
we'll go back to that point.
Cut away.
I was making a call to someone just over the weekend, right? I was making a call to someone just over the weekend, and I didn't call them after 5 o'clock on a Saturday, and I didn't call them before midday on a Sunday.
Wow.
Right? Because, and again, like, I think to myself, I don't have an off button at times, and I'm never out and stuff like that. But subconsciously, I went, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if he's out on the town, and I don't know how he's going to wake up the next morning. So subconsciously, it's in us to think about people's drinking habits. Not that this person has a drinking habit, but subconsciously I went, well, I better not call him after 5 o'clock on a Saturday because I don't know if he's on the drink. And I better not call him on the Sunday morning before lunchtime because I don't know if he was on the drink.
Yeah.
So he's unavailable because there's booze involved. That's crazy, isn't it?
Well, I don't even know if that was the case with that person either.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that was the case. And the person that I'm referring to is a super cool guy, great family man, all of these sort of things. But subconsciously, like I said to myself, oh, don't do that. Just have a bit of respect because he might be out on the drink on the Saturday night and he might be hungover on the Sunday. Like
crazy.
They're the first things that we go to in our mind when we're considering conversations with people.
Yeah. Very thoughtful of you, though.
Yeah.
I at times get myself in trouble because of those because I don't have those boundaries. Like I've been in the wellbeing suicide prevention space for a long time, so I don't have an off button. If someone wants to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, they can call me at 2 o'clock in the morning because you don't have work hours when it comes to trying to help people stay alive.
Yeah, amazing.
So sometimes I just I've got to be a little bit more considerate of other people's boundaries around that stuff.
Well, I certainly think you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, then, Joe, can you take us back? Do you remember the first time you drank booze and took drugs? Can you paint a picture of what that looked like for our listeners?
Going back through my mind, man, you got to remember that if I didn't get knocked around on the footy field, I certainly got knocked around in the head in the boxing ring. But it was again the normalisation of what happens at high school parties and things like that. We were from a prominent family where I was growing up, so and I guess my sports career started fairly early, or the profile around my sports career started fairly early because I signed my first NRL contract at 13. So as like first scholarship contract at 13. So with that comes, things in the media locally in a small town, all that sort of stuff. So any time that I'd try and go out and sneak a few drinks and things like that, every adult knew who I was because I was also playing first grade footy at 14 and 15 around the same age. So I'm on a weekends playing against men, but then trying to live a normal life as a school kid during the week, So So the old fake IDs and things like that. I could never have one because every single person that I went to the bottle-o, they all knew who I was. and if they didn't know me, they knew my dad.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. And yeah, it was one of those things where, just underage drinking and parties and stuff like that. But for me, it wasn't. I guess I didn't realise this till late in my life. And hindsight and reflection is a beautiful thing. Is that I was using alcohol all my life to silence what was going on inside my head. And it wasn't just alcohol. It was all sorts of behaviours, right? All sorts of outlandish behaviours to dissociate from what was happening inside my head. So to take away from the presence of what was going on inside my head, I would smash as much alcohol as I possibly could to drown all that out. And that was before footy games, after footy games, all that sort of stuff. As a kid, and again, at the time, didn't think that this what it was because I was just a kid. Thought that that's what kids do. But for me, it was certainly around dissociating from what was happening inside my head. And then I moved to Sydney. Because I grew up I was born in a place called Cowra, but then grew up in Wagga. When I moved to Sydney, I remember the very first time. Again, another conversation. We shouldn't be separating alcohol and drugs because they're all drugs. Like alcohol is the worst drug that we have in this country. But the first time that I had like drugs, it was like, wow. And it was like, for me, it was just like all the lights had turned on at once. And the spotlight's on me, and I'm the only dancer in front of 10,000 people. And again, that was just to run away from what was happening inside my head. So I certainly remember the very first time. I was always, particularly drugs. And then again, why we're not scared of drinking alcohol is because it's so normalised in all of our communities. But I was super scared to have any type of drugs because I read a book in high school called Anna's Story.
Oh, you were going to say that? I read it.
Yeah, I read a book in high school, right, called Anna's Story, and that just stuck with me. And I was really, really like scared to have any type of drugs like that. Until I did. And then it was like, yeah, the green lights are on. So for me, that and looking back, and I also didn't. One thing I can say that I'm super proud of now is that I've been sober longer than I was ever drinking or taking drugs.
Yeah, unreal.
That's awesome. Right? Incredible.
Because and I've been sober now for 17 years.
Amazing.
Not as long with drugs because again the addict mind convinces you different things, and I convinced myself many years ago now, it's about 7 or 8 years ago, that I needed marijuana medicinally. And I was like, it's legal in the US, and I need it as a medicinal sense. So it's fine. So I had a night. It wasn't a big night or anything like that. I smoked some pot and realised what I was doing shouldn't have been doing. That was, still a number of years ago, but I can't sit here and say that I'm completely clean and sober for 17 years.
Yeah. Just to get a quick picture, what was the first drug that you took? I'm curious.
Besides alcohol.
Besides, actually, what was the alcohol that you had? I like to know both. I like to have a picture.
Beer, but then also just like the memories flood back, vodka. Because
vodka orange?
No, it wasn't vodka orange. It was vodka raspberry.
Oh, yeah.
And not cream and soda because I didn't like cream and soda. I needed the raspberry, Wow. Where are all these memories coming from?
Yeah.
I remember, the old, going halves with a mate, or or with a cousin or something like that, and one of you tip half of the soft drink bottle out, and then tip. Oh man, wow, this is a long time ago.
Yuck.
Yeah, and I actually remember a cop, and you know how they say you can't smell vodka? Is that right? I actually remember a cop. I don't know if you actually can or you can't. But I remember
you can't. Yeah,
you can't. But I remember a cop. He actually pulled up, and I know this guy, and he was a local coach at the time and all that sort of stuff. So he knew exactly who I was and what I was doing. And he pulled up and he goes, "What he's got there, boys?" And I said, "Oh, just some soft drink." and he lifted the lid off and he smelled it. He goes, "Oh, that's not bloody soft drink," and then started tipping it out and stuff like that. And again, like, country cops and stuff like that. For me, and it was probably a benefit, the fact that I played footy and this guy was involved in the footy club and stuff like that as well. And it never went past him or anything like that. So he didn't tell the old man or anything like that. But there was always times of again, just drinking at parties and things like that. But so much of me was scared to do that because I was aware that everyone knew my parents, and I was aware that everyone knew who I was. So I was very mindful that whenever we had parties and things like that, and this is something I guess my parents are proud of as well, is that they've had so many parents over the years come up to them and say, "I remember in year 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, your boy come into our house and introduced himself." And that was something that I was always proud of, because again, like, only Aboriginal boy that was at the school that I was at. So all of my mates are non-Aboriginal people. We don't have to go into the historic measures of challenges between non-Aboriginal people and Aboriginal people. But I was always the person. I didn't want to be the little troublemaking dark kid. I was always the guy who probably plays into a little bit of my addict behaviours as well, of being the charmer and all that sort of thing. Go in and go in and say hello to the mum and dad and shake the old man's hand, and then they'd say to the daughters, "He's a good kid, that kid." Gotcha. Gotcha. But
well played.
The addict behaviours started at a young age, right?
Oh yeah. And what was it? Do we circle back to the first drug?
Oh yeah. What was it?
I remember. It was ecstasy. It was ecstasy for me around that, and then it just went on a spiral of ecstasy, speed, coke, all that sort of stuff. I've written some stuff in my book, and I don't I don't want to disclose other people and their stories and stuff like that, but I remember. No, we won't go there.
That's okay. Absolutely not. Yeah. Your book's there.
Yeah.
There if people want to read about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting back to that Anna story, though, I read that too. Joe Mum gave it to me to read, and I still remember feeling absolutely petrified of ecstasy. And I actually spoke about it to my daughter the other day. Something came up, and I mentioned that book to her. It had a massive impact, but like yourself, it didn't stop me from then experimenting and taking all the things. Now, Meso and I, we're from Victoria, so we are AFL. So talking about NRL, it's a little bit foreign to us, Joe, so bear with us. But you were drafted to South Sydney in NRL, and your career spanned from 2004 to 2008. On the money there. So tell us what it was like as a player. Obviously, you came up boost in 2005, so you obviously had some of your professional career when you're on the sauce and the other chunk of it when you were sober. So can you tell us what that was like, the early days of when you're playing sport and drinking versus not?
So 04 to 08 was only the top grade years. So it was, before that I was actually, and in your language I'll say drafted. I was pick that one up. I was signed up actually at at South Sydney's biggest rivals. I was signed at the Roosters first. as a 13-year-old kid by a beautiful man called Arthur Beetson, who's an immortal of the game and has done, is, I guess, his memory of who he is lives long after the fact that he's passed away. But I was signed by Beetson as a 13-year-old kid, stayed in the bush until I was 16, moved to Sydney, and then played junior grades for the first 3 years at the Roosters, and then I went to South at the end of 2003. So I started the 2004 season, and that's when I played, started top grade there. But without a doubt, the early years of, firstly, as someone underage in Sydney, going to school in Sydney, finishing year 12 in Sydney, and then the early years at the Roosters, was I think I didn't really go heavy till it was problematic on the drugs until I was actually playing first grade. So from that to end of that to I didn't have my first drug until of what we know as drugs until the end of the 2004 season, and then I got sober. At the end of 2000 end of 2005, started 2006. So I went on a spiral, in a 18-month, 2-year period where it was really challenging. And then not just that stuff. It was the prescription pills that were a huge issue with me as well, which was, again, looking at it is just trying to escape what's going on inside your head, just trying to quieten down what's happening inside your head. So I got sober when I was at the height of my NRL career. And that was a challenge because, and I tell this story all the time, it was the 2007 season, so it was the end of 2006. We had at the preseason, we had our Christmas party, and the Christmas parties in the years before that were just chaotic, right? But now I'm sober, right? So a Christmas party, and it was on a cruise, I was on a boat, and I said to the coach, I can't come. He's like, what do you mean you can't come? Like it's the end of season drink, like it's our Christmas drink before we break up, and then we kick off the season next year. He said, just have a couple, don't go mad. And I was like, that don't work for me. That don't work for me. And it was one of the most challenging times for me mentally and emotionally in the days and hours leading up to getting onto that boat. And my wife at the time, she was like, I'll support you. And even the boys were like, it'll be cool, Joe, we'll support you, all that sort of stuff. And I had a fairly senior staff member at the club. I won't disclose who it was, but a fairly senior staff member at the club. He joked to other people around and said, let's see how long that lasts.
Oh.
When I was talking about, I'm not gonna drink anymore. And that's the challenges around, and I've had conversations with that guy since. And I was like, I haven't had a drink since that, even those times when you said that. And like, he's super proud of me. And he was like, Joe, I'm sorry I doubted him. Like he owned mm-hmm. that conversation, wasn't a hugely encouraging and supportive conversation as well. But, again, it goes back to the point of, if there's young people that have recognised that they've got an issue with alcohol in their life, we've got to support them if they don't want to drink, rather than encourage them. It's all right, don't, just have a few. Like, because there was plenty like that. But also, I will say that during my time of sobriety, I walked up and ordered a beer at the bar, and a fairly significant player at the club, he come up to me, he said, put his arm around me, he said, don't do it, brother. He said, you've been off it for so long. And that so long was 8 months at that point. that's so long, like, was I don't think it was even 12 months. He goes, mate, you're going so much better, not just on the field, but as a person. He said, don't do it, brother.
Love him.
Oh, and he's and again, I won't disclose who that person is, but a fairly significant person within the club that I was playing at the time he was a rookie, and now will be spoken about as one of, I'll say it, South Sydney's greatest players.
Oh, what insight he had as
that's some leadership, right? That's some leadership right there. He said to me, and this guy was younger than me, he said, brother, don't do it. Brother, don't do it.
What a guy. We'll buy the book. We'll buy the book to find out who that is. What a legend. That's amazing insight they had. Yeah. So, Joe, you gave up alcohol in December 2005 and you had that real heavy spell. It was the 18-month period just when you're really giving it a hard crack when you were playing in the big league. At what point did you recognise you're addicted and how did you get clean?
I love this conversation. At what point do people, because I've had so many conversations with people who say that they're not addicted. Right?
Yeah.
And I say to them, we'll try and stop.
Yeah.
If you don't think you're addicted, try and stop.
Yeah.
And we'll see, and we'll have that conversation again.
Yeah.
You know, I just enjoy a couple of drinks, you know. I'm not addicted. I just enjoy a couple of drinks. Okay, we'll stop.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a conversation.
That's our little quote. If sobriety was easy, everyone would be doing it.
100%.
Yeah.
So I realized that alcohol, every problem that I was having in my life, every challenge that I was having in my life, every negative behaviour, every argument at home, every poor form on the footy field, fight on the street, all that sort of stuff, everything that was negative that was happening in my life, there was one common theme. It was alcohol and drugs.
When did you? I really want to know when you realised that, when the light bulb moment went off.
It was.
So many people don't understand the correlation between that.
It was a conversation in the backseat of the car with a beautiful friend of mine who I'm still close friends with, who I won't disclose his name.
By the book.
By the book. But he, and this isn't a plug for the book by any means, but he was the noted party guy. Yeah. He was the noted party guy that everyone went, you know, this guy, he would give it a red hot crack, you know, and he wasn't around much anymore. Right, and we're playing touch footy, so he was around the touch footy circle, and those who know my story will know exactly who I'm talking about. Those who were playing touch footy with us at the time will know exactly who I'm talking about. And we're in the back seat of the car, and I said, "Where you been, mate? Like, I haven't seen you in ages. What's been happening?" And he goes, "I just don't go out anymore." I was like, "What do you mean you don't go out anymore?" And he's like, "I don't drink anymore, Joe." And that to me hit me between the eyes because I was like, I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen it. Like, right, and it wasn't, again, because of how normalised alcohol is, not because it was problematic everywhere that I went, because everyone just loves a beer of a Friday afternoon or even a beer after work and that sort of stuff, right? And it was a conversation with that guy heading down the Hume Highway. Pretty sure it's the Hume Highway, heading to a little place called Yass, where we played the touch footy knockout. And when he said that to me, I wanted that. I was like, I want that in my life, you know, like because I knew consciously and subconsciously, I knew that everything that was happening that was negative in my life was associated with alcohol. And he said, I don't do it anymore, and I haven't done it for 2 years, and that just blew my mind. Right, and he was and he told me that you know he was doing different things to help with his sobriety and all of this sort of stuff, and we ended up rooming together. And I said, after obviously a 5-hour conversation down the highway, I said, "That's it. When I go back to Sydney, I'm not drinking anymore." And he said, "When you go back to Sydney, why not stop now?" And I just went, whoa. and everything inside me couldn't stop now. Couldn't stop. So I just said, and again, the ego of what you might miss out on and all those sort of things. I said, no, I'll give it one more crack, and then we'll do it. Go back to Sydney.
One last blowout. Farewell.
So then we head back down the highway back to Sydney. Hungover as 10 men. He was fresh as Daisy. He was the only one fresh the next day, playing touch footy, flying around a million miles an hour, and we were all struggling to breathe. And I went into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that Monday night.
Wow.
And because, again, it wasn't that my life was so unmanageable, but I couldn't win when it come to the argument with alcohol, whether I do or I don't. Mm-hmm. I couldn't win. Right? Everything inside me told me just to have one, just to have two, or just to have none, and I couldn't win that argument. So every time one had turned into 100, and when it turns into 100 comes the other stuff, the drugs and the ego and thinking you're the world's best looking person and the troubles that gets you into with all of that, So it was just, I went into AA, and then every single person I connected with, every single person that I heard speak about themselves, I went, holy shit, that's me.
Wow.
That's me. Every single person that's talking, that's me. And of course, I had the hat on and the hood over me because I was playing in the NRL.
Yeah. Did you go to a local AA, Joe?
In Sydney, yeah.
Yeah.
In Sydney, I remember the rooms. It was in Wallara.
Huh.
And a few people come up and when a few people started to want to talk about footy and stuff like that, a couple of the older people say, come on, he's not here for that, but for me, I was just sitting down in my chair thinking that the spotlight was on me, not knowing that everyone else is there just to get the same outcome of trying to be well and sort their life out and manage their life.
Mm.
So that started for me. I didn't do the 90 meetings in 90 days. I gave it a red hot crack, but I wasn't consistent like that. But there were times when, and this is the thing, right? But I'll tell everyone that is hesitant about going into the rooms. And everyone who's involved in the rooms will understand exactly what I'm talking about. The chaos in my head every time I'd go into those meetings compared to the chaos that was non-existent when I left the meetings, you just can't buy that.
Unreal.
So
Incredible.
It wasn't as if it wasn't as if there was a magic remedy that when I went into those rooms that I was my head was on fire with everything that was happening in my life, to the peace that those rooms give you and the normality that you are actually, there's nothing wrong with you, is something you can't buy. I didn't stay sober completely with that. I got to, I think it was about 10 or 11 months. Because that was January, right? That was January, January 27, 28 or something like that. I went into the rooms, and then I went on, I had a junior league presentation day that I went out, and everyone was going, have a drink, Joe, have a drink, all this sort of stuff, because it was at a pub, and it was about, celebrating the end of the season, all that sort of stuff, just back in the country, all that. It's like, no. I think it was 11 months, and then I was like, righty, I'll just have one, bang, and I was gone for 3 weeks.
Mm.
And then and I just noticed it. I know this is something else I haven't spoken about. It's just come up to me now. Is that my mum was living in the bush, back in Wagga, where my family lived, and we were changing over kids. So we go halfway so the kids would go back and spend some time with their grandparents back in the bush. And I remember so distinctly, and I haven't even spoken about this actually. I was sitting in her hotel room, and I drank everything in the minibar, and literally just and I had like, you don't realise how problematic that lifestyle is until you're playing. I was playing footy in the NRL, so I was earning a better wage than a lot of people, and I didn't have a single dollar in my pocket.
Blowing it all up your nose.
You know, just blowing it all. You know, whether down my neck or up my nose. And I was sitting in Mum's hotel room, right? Because I just went down there to swap over the kids, stayed there the night, and then drive home. Sitting in Mum's hotel room by myself, right? They were all asleep. So me by myself, Mum telling me to turn the lights off and keep it down, in the dark, drinking by myself.
Ooh.
Whilst my kids were asleep, my mum was asleep in the room, and I'm sitting there drinking by myself everything that was in the minibar. And that's when I just went, Joe, you just went 11 months without it. You've tried to go back and control it. Just have a look at yourself. I remember looking at myself in the mirror, going, this isn't who I want to be. Then I went back to the rooms of AA after that.
That dipping your toe back in, I think, is sometimes an important little lesson, isn't it? To just go, oh, yep, that's right. This isn't what I want to be. I did the similar thing, Joe. I did the whole look in the mirror thing, and I looked in the mirror at myself and just went, God, when did you turn 100? Like, you can't do this anymore. Like, you look like shit. I didn't even look like myself. And, yeah, I can really relate to that. And just like that mini bar, you're just throwing it down the neck, just trying to get the result. Like, you're not enjoying it in a nice fancy glass, having a lovely tipple. You just
for me it was everyone. Like, my kids were asleep. My mum was saying, Joe, quieten it down, man.
What were you doing? Were you on the blower? Like, or music? Or carrying on?
Like, social media wasn't as prevalent then.
Right.
So I couldn't have been sitting on social media all night. So I was obviously just trying to keep myself busy. You know, it was just a mess. And that's when I was like, this is enough, man. You can't do this. And like, your kids are in the bed in the room trying to sleep, and you're here prioritizing your drinking habits over their sleep. That's literally what it comes down to as well.
Yeah.
Like, people don't understand that, is that they say they love their kids and they die for their kids, but they're not even living for their kids.
Powerful.
We're prioritising alcohol over the people that we love the most.
Yeah.
Big cool. Yeah. Wow.
And it's such an isolating disease as well. Like, you're on your own. As you said, you're in a room full of your loved ones, but you were on your own, essentially, just dousing those emotions in booze, or numbing those emotions, I should say.
The struggles I've had mentally and emotionally in my life, you can be surrounded by 1,000 people yet still feel alone. You know, and it's so often the case when we're drinking alcohol as well, is that we're just chasing connection.
Yeah.
We heard that recently, actually, with a guest as well. He shared a story about being in a pub full of his loved ones, but yet he felt like he was the only person in the room, just with his booze.
Have you read the book Lost Connections?
Yes. Yeah. Is that Johan Hari?
Yeah.
Oh, love that man. Amazing.
Yeah, brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Incredible.
Anything by Johan Hari and anything by Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the go-tos for me around addiction stuff now.
Yeah. And if you're not into reading, to our listeners, they're all over YouTube as well. So if reading's not your thing, jump on YouTube. Joe, thank you for sharing some of those stories. I know they're quite hard to go back to, given it was such a long time ago as well. Can we talk about your mental health? Because you are quite open about that, which we love, because you are helping people. I think it was in 2009. So you'd been sober for, what, four or so years. You were given a diagnosis of bipolar. What was it like to hear those words?
Made sense. It made sense because of the but it doesn't make sense until learning about it, right? When you start to do the reading up and all those sort of things, you go, hang on a minute, yeah, 100% that's me. But again, the stigma associated to those sort of things. If we think there's a stigma now, think about what it was like way back then.
Yeah.
You know, so I wasn't super excited to be walking around with a label across my forehead. But it was something that made sense to me. But also I didn't take it serious a hell of a lot either, right? Because not until the challenges that happened with me in 2012. Because when we look, and I know that for the people who are listening and aren't watching, I can see that your head just went to, yes, I'm going to get to that point. But it was like I didn't take it seriously because, you're medicated and you're under-medicated and over-medicated and wrongly medicated and only taking your medication 1 week out of a month, and you start to feel good and then you stop taking your medication and not knowing the actual impact and effects it's having on you. So for me in the early days, it didn't particularly make sense to me until I started to connect with someone who had bipolar disorder as well. Huh. And then it was actually when I was doing some work in the States, and I was you could say I was based half in the States and half in Australia, and I was put on a mood stabilizer, and for me it was like, wow, this is what it's like. Huh. This is what it's like to not be so erratic, and now I can just stay in the middle and be a little bit smoother with all of my interactions and how I'm feeling every single day, right? But then the journey of that took a different direction as well because for me, I won't ever advocate that people shouldn't get medicated because I understand it does a hell of a lot for people, and it did some good for me in the early days, and until again I was on that mood stabilizer, and I was sitting at a funeral and I couldn't cry. Oh. And I went, oh. This isn't right because we're supposed to mourn when we're losing loved ones, and everything in my heart was breaking, but the tears couldn't come out.
Wow.
So then so I went on a different path for that, and sit here today, probably, what are we, 2023, 7 years with no medication.
Oh,
wow, mate, that's amazing.
How do you manage it then, Joe? Like, I'm just curious to know how do you, for people who are listening that may have bipolar disorder, how do you manage it?
So for me with bipolar disorder, is the extreme highs and the extreme lows, right? And what it was originally was I'd got a new psych out here in Australia, and I'd stopped doing the work I was doing in the US. So I got a new psych out here, and they were actually trying to take me off the medication that I was on to start me on a new one, right? So what happened was they had to take me off and slowly try and take, lower the dosage to get to 0 and then start on a new one. So when I slowly to come off one medication, I then actually ran out of the script of another medication. So I was on one medication, and then I was on the mood stabilizer as well. So I'd come off both, and I guess that psych is still waiting for my call back 7 years ago to go on to the new meds. But I said to my partner, I said to her, I need you to call me out if I'm not right, if my behaviours aren't well, because we take it out on our loved ones before we take it out, before we identified ourselves, right? Like we walk all over the people we love the most when we're not well mentally and emotionally through addiction, all that sort of stuff. And I said to her, I promise you that I will do my absolute best to be and stay and maintain my wellness, but I need you to pull me up if it's not. And if I need to go to hospital, I need to go to hospital. And again, I've had, several hospital stays and stuff over my journey. But I said, I need you to advocate for me here. And if it means ring an ambulance, if it means ring the police, do it. Yeah. Because again, when you get so manic, you can't listen to anyone, and you think that what you're doing is right, and you're saving the world, and the impact of what you're doing is perfect. But you don't realise just how manic you are, and how challenging and troublesome it is for other people in your life. And we've got to that point once where she said, "Joe, I think you should go back to the hospital." And it was a time when I was in a really, really, really bad spot, and I come home and I said, "All right, then we'll go up in the morning. Something like that. Just let me sleep it off, and we'll go up in the morning." And then I was okay the next morning, and then I started to make the better changes in my life, or going back to the practices that I was doing that were keeping me well. So bipolar, right? I went there a little bit. Bipolar is extreme highs and extreme lows. When I'm extremely low, I got to get my body moving, right? Whether it's go for a walk, whether it's hit the bag, whether it's go for a run, it's essentially exercise to create the the positive endorphins in my brain to help me to feel better, right? But when I'm extremely manic, what I do is meditate. Right, so the extreme highs, I meditate to get myself back low, to get myself back into a medium, and then when I'm extremely low, I exercise to get myself up. So now, years after not being medicated, I can still trip into a bit of a manic state, but then she'll sort of just give me this look and just sort of go, Joe, for those who can't see, like more or less pulling my hands down to say, Joe, it's time to sort of settle down a little bit. Yeah. Because again, I take it out on the people I love the most. So it's about identifying those behaviours, and I'm all right with identifying those behaviours now.
Are you meditating and exercising daily anyway, just for well-being?
Yeah, just to manage it. Yeah. And again, what we know with exercise, it's, they say 12 hours of rigorous exercise equals enough endorphins produced in the brain naturally for better moods. It also has a long-term effect as well, progressive effect. So if you're not just doing, 12 hours now, if I exercise at 8, that means I've got to exercise again at 8 o'clock tonight because the endorphin hits run out. No. If you keep doing it, it has a prolonged effect as well. So having that, I guess, that active lifestyle of just trying to do something every day, whether it's go for a walk, whether it's, drop down and do some push-ups, all that sort of stuff, just keep our body moving. And when we look at, I guess, the Aboriginal way of life as well, for thousands of years, we ate well because we ate everything from the land, whether it be animals, plants, seeds, nuts, and we exercised because we never had cars. Yeah. Right, so we're a hugely lazy race at the moment as people because it's easier to get an Uber or jump in a car and drive somewhere. So I tell everyone, get your body moving, exercise as much as you can, and eat well the best you can. I'm not saying that I'm a magnet to not the best foods as well. So I'm not here from a soapbox saying that I'm perfect with that. But I know that when I'm not mentally and emotionally well, it's because of what I'm eating and because I'm not moving my body enough. And also understanding what is getting you in these places. Right, the work that I've been doing for a number of years was around the mental health space, but I've transitioned in the last sort of probably a year before the pandemic into the trauma space. So again, looking at understanding the impacts of adversity and trauma in the early years of our lives and how it plays out and impacts our behaviours as adults. So my little what's the word for it? My little saying I have is don't look at what, look at why.
Yeah.
Don't look at what's going on. Yeah. Look at why it's going on. When you understand the why, you can do some work on it. If we just judge the what, we just judge the addict behaviours, we just judge the violence, we just judge all of these different things, and we don't understand why they're happening, then we can't do the work on it.
You would have read the book, Joe. Sorry, mate. So, is it Body Keeps the Score?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through that at the moment. Just blowing my mind every chapter.
This is the thing, right? Is that it's going to get a hell of a lot of people offside with what I say, and this is the reason why I moved to the trauma space, is because all of the mental health behaviours that we have are a product of trauma. So why on earth are we band-aiding the behaviours of mental health when that's not actually the root cause of what's going on?
Yeah.
I was one of the keynotes of the World Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference in 2016, and the buzz around the room was very different than what was in Australia. Because over here we were just talking about mental illness and mental health, and I was like, over there, they were talking about the impacts of colonisation, the changes of our lifestyle, and the changes in behaviours that we have having a direct impact on the way that we live. And when we look at behaviours, all of the behaviours that were problematic are a symptom of trauma. People don't actually understand what trauma is as well. So it's about understanding that. And I was speaking to a brilliant lady, and if you don't know her, you got to get to know her and her work, Auntie Judy Atkinson. Auntie Judy said to me, Joe, every negative behaviour in community is a product of trauma. And I was just like, I didn't get it. I didn't get what she was saying. But then the further you learn about, the more you learn about trauma, the more you understand what happens with our bodily processes, what happens with how we form coping strategies throughout our life, you understand everything you need to know about people's behaviours and where it comes from.
There's a brilliant podcast. I can't remember who you did it with, Joe, but you had a little snippet on one of your reels about children not being resilient. Because everyone says, children are resilient. But you broke it down. Can you explain that? Just because,
children aren't resilient.
Dropped.
Children aren't resilient. Children form coping mechanisms to get through challenging environments. Yet we pass it off like, it's all right, they'll get over it. No, they won't get over it. And if you're halfway through the book, The Body Keeps Score, you'll understand everything of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything, as far as trauma goes, is stored in our body. And we think that we're through it, but then you'll hear a car backfire and you'll absolutely freak out. I did a I don't know if it was I don't know if I put it on my Instagram or on my TikTok. I can't believe I just said that.
I was like, TikTok, look out.
I can't believe I just said that. I feel like I'm like 17. But we're in a local shopping centre, and it was an undercover car park, right? Undercover car park, and there was myself, my partner Courtney, and the two younger ones in the car. Frankie, who's 5, Ari, who's 8. Right, and the post I did was about understanding the different processes of our brain, right? With the trauma, our brain's ability to process trauma and the speed of it and all that sort of stuff, and what happens during that process. So we were under the car park, getting in the car. We're sort of in a little bit of a hurry, and as we were in a bit of a hurry, we were like, "Come on, kids, hurry up, get your seatbelt on," all that sort of thing. A motorbike started up. Harley Davidson started up. It was just absolutely so deafening with its noise, right? Because we're in an undercover car park, it was amplified, right? And all of us, every one of us, Courtney and I both jumped as adults. We jumped, and Frankie and Ari both jumped as well, right? Frankie burst into laughter. She's 5. Burst into laughter. Oh, my God, what was that? That was so loud. Oh. And Courtney and I, we just went, oh, wow, that was a motorbike. All within a split second, we're okay. But then I turned to Ari, and Ari was absolutely frozen stiff. And I was like, come on, mate, hurry up, get your seatbelt on, we're going to go, we're in a hurry. And he was absolutely frozen. And I turned his face to me, and I said, are you all right, mate? And he looked like he'd just seen death. Right? Now, what I'm trying to say is Courtney and I's process of what happened with that sound happened within an instant. You know, it scared us, yes, but then we realised really quickly we're not in any danger here. Frankie, she didn't even particularly understand what it was. She just was scared, and then she just burst into laughter. But Ari, the different parts of our brain, helps us to identify a threatening environment and then go back to, it's got to go through different parts of the brain and then go back to the top part of the brain where you can then sit there like Courtney and I did in an instant and go, we're not in any danger here. But Ari was still going through that process of what was happening in his brain, and he was absolutely terrified. So instead of me going, mate, hurry up, we've got to go, I've got to get down and help Ari regulate what's happening in the process of his brain. So just get down to him, talk to him rather from a parent perspective of talking down to our kids, as in our height, how high we are, talking down to our kids, get down on his level and just show him some connection, not just emotional connection, but show him some physical connection, put my arm around him and say, everything's okay, mate. It's all right. We're not in any danger here. That was a motorbike, and I understand that it was scary, and I understand that really frightened you in that moment, but everything's okay. And that's what we don't have enough of in society when when people are having outbursts. Is that all it is? Trauma stuck in the body, trauma stuck in the brain, different things are triggering us, explosions happen, right? And when the explosions happen, the negative behaviour happens, right? So Auntie Judy says to me, every negative behaviour that happens in our community is a product of trauma. When you understand trauma, what it does to the brain, the impact that it has on our thought processes, on our nervous system, and how it impacts our everyday movements and behaviours, you understand and you see the world through a very different lens.
Huh. Wow, you've just given me a whole new lens.
Yeah.
What a story.
We're so far off the mark in Australia, it's not funny.
Thanks for sharing that, Joe.
We're still stuck talking about anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Whilst it's a very real thing, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Right? But when you have a look at our fight or flight systems, when you have a look at our flight systems and our fight systems, and then you have a look at anxiety, it's exactly what it is playing out.
There's two, and I don't know whether it's come from you. There was, what is it? Treat the cure, not the symptom.
Treat the behavior. Treat the cause, not the cause. Yeah. Treat the cause, not the symptom.
Something like there was something like that. And there was another one I heard recently about when you see somebody that's obviously may have had a reaction like Ari did, or somebody's behaviour is a bit odd or whatever it is, and instead of going, oh, what the fuck's wrong with that guy, you can be like, what actually happened to that guy?
It's a brilliant book. And again, I'm always about reading and learning. There's a brilliant book by a guy called Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah called What Happened to You. Everyone needs to read that book.
Absolutely. That's where it came from. Yeah.
Everyone needs to read that book. It changes the conversation of what's wrong with me or what's wrong with that person to what happened to me what happened to that person.
Yeah.
And everything, again, we all build these coping strategies in the very early years in our life. Okay, we all think, yes, I've had a traumatic lifestyle because of the traumas that happened to me 2 years ago. No. The traumas that originally happened to us in the first 1,000 days of our lives, the first 3.5 years of our life, set up everything of how we respond as adults. Right. Yeah. And those traumas that happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago are just extra layers on top of the original nervous system that was set up.
And I think if we come at it with that narrative as well, and, you know, what happened, instead of saying, what's wrong with that guy, saying, wonder what happened, like we'd have a lot more empathy and kindness for people, wouldn't we, instead of being so judgy and like getting down on you, like Ari's level, and being that as adults, to have that connection. I love that. I'm coming at it. We should all do that.
Well, here's the thing.
Empathy and connection, yeah?
Here's the thing, right? We also have challenges with our young people because they trigger us.
Yeah, right.
Right? Because all young people are trying to do is understand the world. And when they're having these outbursts, all they're trying to do is articulate what it is they're feeling, what they're going through, or understand the process of what's happening. Us as adults, pick your socks up, hurry up, get in your room. I told you once, I told you twice, you're just not listening to me. People don't understand that, particularly with teenagers, and there's some brilliant people to follow and around, teenage brain development and stuff like that. Like, you're old enough, you should know better. No. The human brain doesn't stop developing until we're like 22 or 23 or something.
And even that's questionable.
for a lot of people, 100% it is. And again, like, we just gotta treat people with a hell of a lot more empathy and realize that. All right, another example. Courtney said to me this morning, I think what we're going to try and do is you can do Frankie's homework this afternoon, because I'm someone who's super, because this is the work that I do, right, with young people, and understanding their brain development and the capacity of what they're apt to learning, rather than when a kid can't recognise a letter or a number or a pattern, we get frustrated with it. That's more about us than it's about the kid. Right? So Court was like, can you have a crack at helping Frankie with her homework this afternoon, because you're a bit more patient than me. And I was like, yeah, of course. And again, like, don't get the wrong idea of Courtney, because Courtney is the most placid and patient person in the world. She's been with me for over 10 years. But it's about energies as well, right? Is that she clashes with, well, she doesn't clash, that's a poor word as well. Frankie's very different to Ari, because Ari is very soft, very gentle, very emotional, and Frankie's just like absolute fire. So Frankie's a lot like me. It's just I understand it now. I understand what the fire's about now.
Yeah, wow.
She's a 5-year-old trying to understand the brain. And you can't expect that from a 5-year-old trying to understand different things. Like, that's why I have the most incredible respect for kindergarten teachers and things like that, because like the patience you got to have for those sort of things, hugely respectful.
That's awesome by Courtney too. She's like, no, you're going to be a better fit for
that's all it is.
The little one today, instead of like fighting it. So it's best for everyone. So it's well done, Courtney, for your patience here as well.
Patient girl, mate. As I said, she's been with me for over 10 years, so she's got to be a patient person.
We always love acknowledging partners of people that have been in addiction. So yeah, thank you for keeping these ones upright and alive.
Out like not just the partners, the ex-partners.
Yeah, they've
as
been
well.
through it too.
Yeah, who I was then to who I am now. How I was as a dad then to how I am as a dad now. I've got a hell of a lot of work to make up.
Wow.
And it's just also our older kids can have some resentments to that too.
Yeah.
Dad left. Don't tell me what to do. He walked out when we were 3, 4, 5. Without understanding, different circumstances and things like that. But then also seeing this different person with different kids now, and how he is now as a dad compared to how he was as a dad can be super triggering.
Yeah.
Right? But it's also just about acknowledging, you know what? Yeah, like I understand that. The biggest confronting thing for me that happened during the pandemic was the best thing in the world to me. And I say that with respect that a hell of a lot of people found it challenging. But it was the best thing in the world for me because it gave me my greatest insights. It taught me that I've been a father for 18 years and a dad for 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah?
Wow.
So with my oldest kids was when I was playing in the NRL, was when I was with the alcohol and drug addiction, and then separated, right? And then I didn't see or speak to my kids for a great deal of time. Repartnered, another child, separated when he was 1 year old. Never around in the early years of my 3 oldest ones, because of different circumstances of separations and or drug addictions, and just not knowing how to be a good dad.
Yeah.
Right? But then the work that I had to do throughout the pandemic was because I don't get me wrong, the trajectory of who I was going to be the same, except the world shut down and I couldn't go anywhere. So I was forced to stay at home. And then I was forced to set up Zoom meetings around day naps and organising lunch for the kids and all the stuff that parents do every day of the week on their ear. I didn't know how to do it.
Wow.
So it just gave me a whole new insight and appreciation for the mothers of my kids, because I've got 5 kids in 3 separate relationships, particularly the mothers when I went around, dealing with the emotions of kids when dad's not around.
Yeah.
No, nothing but respect for that.
Oh, love that.
Love that.
The pandemic really, I feel like it's a bit of a common theme on the podcast, don't you reckon, Breezer? That it was, obviously it was really shit for so many people, but I feel like in this particular sober space, it was a bit of a blessing. Have you found that? It's a bit of a common theme. So thanks for sharing that, Jo, and that insight, and to be able to acknowledge that you were a shit dad for a bit, and you're making amends with that now. It's amazing.
Let's language is important.
Sorry.
Right? No, don't be sorry. It's all good. Language is important. The words are important.
Yeah.
I was being the best dad that I could with the tools that I had.
Yeah.
Right? And also, I was also a little bit neglectful because I knew that I could be a better dad. I just didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I was scared that if I did it and it wasn't good enough, then I'd be falling up short.
Yeah.
So it was easier for me to not give 100%, because then I always knew subconsciously that I had a little bit more if I needed it. But if I gave 100%, it was all through my sports career as well. If I gave 100% and I fell short, then I know I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
But if I don't give 100% and I've got a little bit left in the tank and I fall short, well, I didn't try my hardest.
Huh.
And all of that comes down to different experiences we have in our life that forms different behaviours and coping strategies for things like self-sabotage and stuff when we're older.
The old self-sabotage.
I can see
do a whole podcast about that.
I can see two brilliant women in front of my screen right now with their heads doing absolute backflips at some of the things that I've been saying.
Well, talking about backflips, let's talk about some sport and let's talk about boxing. So we love it. Why did you choose? Why'd you get into boxing? And what did it do for you, Jo?
I always loved boxing as a kid.
Pow.
Even when I was playing in the NRL, if there was Friday night fights and Friday night footy in, I'd watch the fights all the time. Because it was like boxers just had this awe about them. Not often did they live an unhealthy lifestyle. They always lived a clean lifestyle. They were always training hard. You get some different challenges with what we see as attitudes being formed across the media with different boxers and so forth. But you meet boxers and you sit down with boxers, they're some of the humblest people you could ever come across. Because there's always somebody better in the gym. There's always someone that can punch you in the mouth. And for me, boxing taught me so much about myself, more than life could ever do, is because I was in there with a guy trying to knock my teeth out, and I had to search deep within myself. And the little voice that's going on in your head now, the little voice that's going on in my head, that talks to you in the boxing ring louder than ever. And it questions: Are you good enough to be in here? Are you fit enough to be in here? Why did you eat that hot dog before you trained? It's sitting there waiting to come up. It teaches you so much about life and about who you are. Is that I can honestly say that when I was a footy player, if I searched deep inside myself, I didn't like the person I found. As a boxer, now post-career as well, when I search deep within myself and I got to lean on that person, I know he's standing there right beside me. He ain't hiding in the shadows. He ain't hiding in the shadows because that voice inside you talks to you, right? That voice inside you talks to you, and that voice inside you is just a little version of you, a little version of you that was insecure, that needed some love and safety, and that little version of you wants, within everything inside themselves, to stand there in the midst of fire, to be able to stand and confront it. But because of different circumstances and exposure of different things throughout our life, that little person finds it safer to go back into the shadows. That's who I was as a footy player. Right. And I just read an autobiography of who I would consider as the greatest athlete in the modern age. Right? Sonny Bill Williams.
Yes.
Right? Sonny Bill destroyed it in rugby league, destroyed it in rugby union, and then killed it in boxing.
What a gun.
Like over many, many years. And and over many sports. You know? So and reading Sonny's book and knowing how dominant that guy was, and I was at the Bulldogs the week he left. It was like a funeral hit the joint, right? The week he took off overseas. But Sonny, in his book, talking about the insecurities that he has and has had all throughout his life, it was mind-blowing to see how good that he was on the sporting field and in the sporting arena, to knowing that deep within himself that little person still fights with him too. You know, so like boxing taught me so much about that. It taught me so much about myself. It taught me how to stand up and fight, not physically, but also mentally. And we know that the work that I've done predominantly more so in the last 10 years has been about mental health and been about, you know, silencing that voice that's inside your head and also learning to love that voice that's inside your head. You know, silencing is probably the wrong direction of what we need to go. We always talk about, you know, defying the enemy within, which was the name of my autobiography, right? But that little voice inside our head just needs love, just needs security. You know, and boxing taught me so much about myself. And I learnt more out of my losses than I did out of my wins, because you don't fight for another 3 to 4 months and you've got to be in the gym every single day perfecting things to make sure that you don't get clipped with the same shot, right? And the insecurities around that. Every time you step into step in the ring, you know, through the ropes to spar, the insecurities of that, it's the practice day after day after day after day on those little things that teach you about discipline, that teach you about resilience, that are lessons for life.
Yeah.
They're not lessons about punching people in the face. So boxing taught me more about myself and more about life than anything else ever has.
Brilliant.
I feel like it's such a underrated sport. I actually did my year 12 CAT on boxing. And yeah, I did. I think I went all right in it. But just the physical and mental strength that you need as a boxer. Like, it's hard to compare another sport like it, maybe triathlon or, you know, Ironman, but just that, physical, mental, even just step in the bloody ring itself.
I think any combat sport, similar, any combat sport, like, if you haven't done the work physically,
you're exposed.
In the 10 weeks that you've lead up for that fight, that little voice inside your head will tell you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Every single time. Every single time. So, also, I wasn't the world's best trainer as a rugby league player, because as a rugby league player, I was this gifted young kid. As I told you, I was signed at a very early age and had the expectations to go on to great heights and all that sort of stuff. Fell short because I didn't work hard. You know, I played in the NRL. I didn't play anywhere near as much as I probably wanted to play or should have played. That was because I didn't work hard. Boxing taught me how to work hard, because I got a second chance at doing this thing called sport, right? But also boxing for me wasn't about punching people. Boxing for me was about learning about me. You know, I was never going to be the world's best boxer, but it taught me and shaped me to be the person who I am sitting in front of you today.
Yeah. There's no growth without pain.
That's it.
That's for sure.
That's it.
Mm.
You touched on it. And how are you going for time, Joe, too? I'm just mindful of time. You good? Because we've just, like, I just looked down the clock. I'm like, shit, we're all in the zone here, I think. We're nearly an hour and a half. Like, I think we're all in the zone. We've got a few more questions to get through.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, sweet. You touched on before, Joe, and we did ask you before the potty started recording if there was anywhere, any areas that were off limits, but you said no, open book, And what did you say? What did you actually say? You said they're the conversations that need to be had there.
I get asked often, people always want to do like interviews before we actually do things.
Interview.
Like you both sent through questions. Did you send through questions?
Yeah, you probably didn't get them though, because the emails were going. I don't know where they were going. But
no, I didn't get them, and I rarely read them anyway. It's not because it comes from a place of disrespect. It comes from a place of being punched in the head too much, and I forget them. Anyway, so you might as well just tell me when you got me. But all of the time they say when we have these little pre-interviews before different sessions or things like that, right? Is there any question we can't ask, Joe? Are there any topics you don't want to go to? And I'm like, they're the topics you need to go to.
Yeah.
Because if we don't ask the questions, we won't know, and we'll form our own belief anyway. Yeah. Or we'll listen to the rubbish we've been taught and told. Right? Yeah. That's the challenge with, particularly around race in this country and being a First Nation man, right? And everyone knows that, I'm staunch and I'll stand up for different things and have conversations about complex issues, because I'm also articulate enough to be able to have these conversations around, if they are triggering to me, I'm also smart enough to either steer away from different things or challenge the person who's asking the questions at where their belief comes from, because words are important and words are everything of the conversations that we have every single day. So I always say they're the questions that we should be asking. So if you got any tricky questions, let's dance.
Yeah, walk it into the fire. We're storming in.
That's I think it's so refreshing. Like, we haven't had our guests that have been that welcoming to ask those, perhaps slightly uncomfortable questions. But we are going to go there, Joe, and talk about 2012. And you have openly spoken about your suicide attempt. Can you share with us and our listeners what led to that moment? Unpack that.
Yeah, I can. I'm just telling. I've just got somebody about to come into the house, so I was just making sure that they're nice and quiet when they walk in the door. I don't know if you can edit that part out or what, but
we can.
We thought you were having a really long moment to gather your thoughts. So I'm like, this is really building up to something.
I always talk about the most challenging day of my life. Without a doubt, the most challenging day of my life was a day in 2012 that I tried everything within the power of my two hands to not be sitting in front of you today.
Oh.
Something bigger than me kept me here, because if I had it my way, I wouldn't be sitting here talking. And for me, that day sits with me every single day. That day is a challenging time, and for me, it's a time that I relive over and over, but it's also a time that gets re-triggered every time I hear of, every time I hear of an experience, or every time if I hear somebody die, particularly somebody close to me, and not because I know exactly what it is, the experiences they went through, but even deeper than that, I know the moment that they flipped the coin inside their head and said, should I or shouldn't I? That's the most challenging thing. Is that people, what people don't realise and understand is that 1,000 times a minute that question gets asked to us. Should you or shouldn't you? Is it easier if you're not here anymore? And I can say to people, and I've spoken to numerous survivors throughout my years of working in this space, is that it's not that we wanted to die in that moment. is that we thought that was the only answer to end the pain. And I won't speak for anyone else, but I know that one thing's for certain is that I was gifted with a second chance, and I'm not going to let that second chance go. And for me, every single day, I accept that today's a gift for me and a reason that I'm here for something greater, right? They say that the two most important days of our life are the day we're born and then the day we find out why we're born. So many people are just wandering aimlessly through life not knowing why they're here. It took me to the absolute depths in 2012 for me to find out why I'm here. For many years, I thought it was about footy. For many years, I thought it was about boxing. For many years, I thought it was about sport in general. But without a doubt, the purpose of why I'm here is to help people to understand who they are and why they are doing the things that we do every day in communities.
Unreal.
Thank you for sharing that, Joe.
Sorry, go.
Yeah, no, you go. You go.
I just this is the question that's popped up recently because there has been someone in my hometown that took his life last week, and I was having a conversation with some friends and just said, and I'd love to hear your opinion, Joe, is why don't we hear about this in the media? As an opportunity to educate people. Like, you know, there might be an article about someone who has passed away, then at the bottom they'll have a Lifeline number. But why aren't we having the conversations of how it is, of what happened?
I think, you know, media and media guidelines around this topic are quite sensitive. And is it going to re-trigger someone?
Yeah.
When they're reading it at home with no support in place? That's why I think they do it. But we most definitely should be having these frank conversations now as who we are as people, because conversations are going to save lives. And people say that, you know, how does talking about a story save lives? Well, talking about things normalises the conversation, right, one, but also it helps people to understand that you're not the only one going through this.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot of us. And that was the thing back in 2014 when I first started doing this work. That was the biggest thing that for me is like, I'm talking some of the most respected people that I was working with in prominent places were coming up saying to me, looking over their shoulder going, what you speak about, Joe, I go through the exact same thing. And I've never known how to talk about it the same. So they're the priceless moments that we have around that. But also I've always said that particularly in that space, I've never professed to say that I know everybody's answer. But I will say that I'm like a conduit between the people and the professional. Is that whilst sharing stories and sharing setbacks and adversity that we go through in life is important, it's also important that we understand and we get the right help, right? Because we've also got too many people out there just speaking about different things that aren't particularly equipped to speak about. They're equipped by all means to speak about their own story, by all means. But as far as how we say it safely and what do we do if somebody gets triggered around different things, and how do we have the conversations around it if people are struggling with different challenges mentally and emotionally. So there's a very fine line around that. And I think we also got to get to a place where we're having conversations about why we're feeling like this. As I said earlier in this podcast, I believe Australia is so far off the mark when it comes to these conversations of what we should be happening. Because if we're all conditioned in the very early years of our life And the conditioning in the very early years of our life is setting up impacts in how we behave and how we are feeling now as adults, then shouldn't we be addressing that rather than looking at the Band-Aids now?
Mm.
It's like we're putting millions and millions of dollars. I said it on Mark Burr's podcast recently. I said the conversations around mental health are now louder than ever. The money going into mental health is now more than ever. But we're still dying more than ever.
Yes. Yep.
So it tells me one thing. What we're doing isn't working. And there's so many people that are working in organisations, that are starting their own organisations and charities that are just Band-Aids.
Mm.
And we have a look, just this week, and sorry to date it, but just this week we talked about a new massive bucket of money to go to the Close the Gap, right? But which is about health outcomes of non-Indigenous people and First Nation people of this country because of the date of the apology and all that sort of stuff. So there was a large bucket of money said that they're going to be pushed towards closing the gap. Again, there's squillions of dollars going into the communities, but things aren't getting better.
Yep.
So if you've got if you got a CEO that's spending millions and millions and millions of dollars and not getting results, something tells me that's not the right CEO for your company.
Yeah.
Right, like basics. Yeah, but let's have a look at the depth of what it is. This is Aboriginal people's lives, and we're dying more than ever. We're dying younger than ever, and we're addressing the wrong issues.
Mm-hmm.
We're putting millions of dollars in Band-Aids in communities. So if we put another $1 billion go down, how about we start having a look at where that goes to? And let's quit funding the organisations with the glossy magazines and the brilliant grant writers, because my people are dying more than ever. Right? And if the mental health rates are getting worse and the incarceration rates are getting worse, I'll go back to what Auntie Judy said, behaviour is language.
Yeah.
Let's start having a look at the language we're speaking.
Yeah.
Because I'll say it, Aboriginal people are a business. Keeping Aboriginal people sick is making a hell of a lot of people rich.
It's just, something missing, isn't there? It's a big piece of the puzzle.
Big time.
Well, here's the thing. If I go into your house and I say to you, I know how to fix your kids. I know how to fix your kids. I know how to fix you. You just got to give me the money to do it, right? And then I don't do it. What happens, right, is that you know how to fix you and your kids more than anyone, don't you? So wouldn't it make sense to me, and again, I'm not the world's smartest person, but wouldn't it make sense to start funding Aboriginal people with Aboriginal initiatives, Aboriginal-led and run programs, particularly when it's our people dying? When there's a hell of a lot of non-Indigenous organisations getting millions and millions and millions of dollars with the results not getting any better?
Madness.
Wouldn't that make sense? Again, I'm not the world's smartest person, and I'm not in any place of power to be able to make these decisions. That's what we've got, these wonderful people we call politicians. Who would ever want to do that? I don't know. But again, it makes our communities pull their hair out. It really does.
I feel like the work you're doing, though, Joe, would be making, are you on the right path to be making that difference with the work that you're doing?
The work I'm doing has never been singularly funded.
Yeah, right.
Right? So everyone else gets the funding to get me in.
Yep.
Some of the biggest organisations get me to come and work and educate their teams.
Wow.
So why not just fund me to do the work?
Like direct, yeah.
Like it's stupid. But again,
crazy.
I'm not about, because the direction of what I'm doing is changing.
Yeah.
The direction of what I'm doing is changing, and we will be launching in 2024. But we've been working on something for about 4 or 5 years in a completely different space, completely new space, all with the same outcomes. So we're piloting a pilot this year.
Ooh, this
Been
sounds
4 years. Been 4 years in the making, and I haven't spoken about it to anyone.
we're getting the scoop.
Well, I'm only telling you as much as I've told everyone else.
Well, I guess that's actually a good segue for the actual couple of next questions we've got here, Joe. Talking about your Indigenous heritage as part of your recovery. Like, how did that help? Like, reconnecting with that, how did that help?
You know, for me, I always say that AA got me sober.
Yeah.
And the practices of culture and the learning of different aspects of that, and sensitive around things that I can and can't say. But I always say that AA got me sober, culture and law kept me sober.
Oh, love that.
Right, because of the responsibilities I have that within that. Right, so again, particularly within culture, we talk about we always talk about respect for our elders and the part that they play in community. What's just as important, and by no means am I anywhere near an elder, and I don't claim to be that, but it's my obligation to share with people younger than me. It's my obligation. So it's not just my responsibility, it's my obligation. So and modeling that, right? Because we can't be what we can't see. And for me, that friend of mine who sat in the back of the car down the Hume Highway, he said to me, he showed me that there was a life without alcohol, that there was a life without drugs, right? And for me, I just model that and model the different things that I've learnt throughout that. So people have the wrong concept of what culture is as well. And again, I don't talk on behalf of anyone, but particularly white fellas, they think that culture is just about dance or just about artwork or just about musical instruments and sound and things like that. But a great friend of mine who's actually a counsellor on the Tamworth Council, Mark Sutherland, Councillor Sutherland as he's now known, he said that those are all a product of culture, right? They're the end product, right? So when we see that beautiful dance, when we see that that instrument being made, when we see that beautiful artwork, they're all the end product of culture. It's the stories that lead up to that and the processes that happen throughout it is what the culture is. And all of that is a way to heal suicide throughout the world. Right? There's Gabor Mate in the trauma field did a brilliant documentary called The Wisdom of Trauma. And Gabor talks about how Indigenous peoples throughout the world had the answers.
Yeah, right.
And then colonisation happened and completely disrupted the family network, completely disrupted everything that we did as people. Again, walking country, exercise, eating good foods, healthy, right? Artworks, making tools, hunting, all the processes of culture were about the place of being present in the mind, which stops us from projecting and living in the future or reflecting and living in the past. So what can non-Indigenous people learn from a people that have been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years? Here's the thing, right? The oldest documentation of humankind started right here in Australia. And non-Indigenous people can't tell me anything about us. we can tell you everything about you, because that's all we've learned for 200 years. You can't tell us anything that will benefit your life about us. Right? We weren't just people walking around aimlessly that threw sticks at animals to kill them. You know, we had the original scientists. We had the original people. Like some of the oldest man-made structures in the world were made by our people. Right? It just takes a hell of a lot of ignorance to not try and take some of those things on board.
Yeah, I do get really frustrated. That we don't know more and this isn't more embraced. Like all the other cultures, you know, I've travelled the world, so have you, Breezer, and every country we go to embraces their culture, and Australia is the only one that doesn't, and it makes me so mad. And I hope.
Why do you think?
Why do I think it is?
Yeah.
Because we're
Go there.
exactly
Go there.
No, because we're ignorant.
You've been asking me all the tough questions. Go there.
No, because I think we're ignorant. I think we've just completely ignorant, and I hate it. And I'm sorry
Let's
for
go
that.
deeper.
I'm embarrassed
What's ignorance?
Well, not thinking with our own minds, listening to, you know,
ignoring something.
Yeah.
Ignorance derives from the word ignoring. Right?
Yeah.
It comes from a place of white supremacy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hate that. And I'm
The
embarrassed
supreme
about
belief,
that.
the supreme belief that I'm right over you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how different would the conversation be if 225 odd years ago, the first people who got off the boats went, wow.
Yeah.
Have a look at these people that have been here for thousands of years, through multiple ice ages,
Yeah.
live in some of the harshest and barren climates in the world, yet don't want for anything.
Yeah.
It only takes a real stupid person to come here and say, they don't know nothing. You know, and you know what? The first people who got off the boats, they told their kids that, and they told their kids that, and then they told their kids that, and then they told their kids that, and then they told their kids that, and that's where we are today.
Yeah. And now
Just today, just this week, I'd like to think that we're in a better place, and we're learning as a country. Just this week, I sat in a tribunal of 2 young kids that were racially vilified. Just this week. You know, so we can't say it happened all the way back then, because it still happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that generational conversation.
Kids that get followed around in the supermarket with the bias to think that they don't have money to buy what they want. Kids getting followed home from school and are no longer with us, which was a big incident that happened, right, in the western parts of our country recently. Like it's still prevalent now. We can't for 1 minute say that it's not there. We have to actively dismantle that rubbish.
Yep. Couldn't agree with you more, Joe.
Yeah. And I think, it starts at home. Like it starts at home. I think it's a lot of those conversations that you're having with, you know, family members, older or younger, it doesn't matter, but it needs to start at home, around, you know, kitchen table, out and about with friends. Those grassroots conversations.
Generational change. And I honestly can sit here and feel like I feel embarrassingly privileged as a white person. And I'm just so sorry we were so shit to our cult, you know, to our Indigenous, to your people. I hate that. It hurts my heart. I'm so sorry.
We got to learn. That's all. Yeah. We got to learn and be able to address what happens, not just around our kitchen table, but what happens. Let's not, you know, I was part of a campaign recently around calling out racism. Yeah. Let's call it out. Like it shouldn't be up to us anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. 100% agree.
Yeah.
100%.
We all bleed the same blood.
Yeah.
But we're not all treated the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's shit. It's it's ignorance.
We'll get there.
We will. We've got you, Joe.
There's so many more people. Like, Joe, you've got I feel like when you talk, people listen. You know,
totally.
You've got such a power.
I know about that.
You've got our ears. You've got our ears. We are going to start wrapping things up, though, with a couple more questions. just before we go into, we've got a couple quick segments we want to do, but I need to know how, like, you've been sober for 17 years, which is incredible. Well done. How do you feel about alcohol now?
I just get sad. I get saddened by the fact that people can't see that it's so damaging in communities, and I get saddened that people can't see that all they're doing is just trying to escape what's going on inside their head. You know, all I can do is just model the good behaviours to the young people in my life. My eldest boy is the only boy that has seen me drink. Not that he saw me, but he's 18, so he's the only boy that I've actively had alcohol in my life when he was alive, and every other kid hasn't. So I can't say that you know what, they will have that same life, but you know what, it's helping me to show them that they don't have to do that. Yeah. Because sometimes that's all we need. We just need someone to show us that you don't have to do that. Absolutely. You know what? I look at different things. You know, like you look at Elf on the Shelf, right? And I'm being mindful because my little boy just realised that he was home. I see some little elves around empty beer cans and things like that. And then my elf is sinking its hands into protein powder and chewing on carrots. You know, there's a difference in lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right? And it comes back to normalisation of go get me a beer out of the fridge, son.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like people know that if they're coming to my house for a barbecue, they know not to bring any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't normalise it in front of my kids. I'm not judging anyone that does.
Yeah.
It's just that I choose that lifestyle for me and for myself.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Choosing your family first.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Meso? Should we roll into our fun little segments?
Yeah. Bang into it.
Wasn't that the fun part?
This is funner. This might be a bit of a challenge for you, actually, Joe, because one of our segments is called Phone Fuck Up with a PH, and it's where we get a guest to share, perhaps a phone call they've made or a text message they've sent where they've been under the influence of booze, but they've woken up and gone, holy shit, I just rang my ex, or holy shit, I just rang my boss and gave him a spray. Or so back in the day, I mean, did you have a phone when you were out in the tear? Like what?
Was there no mobile phones way back then? We also, there was only black and white TVs as well.
Did you prank anyone on the landline?
You know what? I've got one.
Phone, fuck up with the PH. So we didn't give an F with the call or text. Phone, fuck up with the PH. Give it a ring, check it, roll the deck.
I was out on a bender. I went to an Oasis concert.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I went to an Oasis concert. Absolutely bent. Can't remember the concert. Can't remember. I remember it was at the Horde and that's it. Can't remember any of it. Well, I was with all my mates from high school, and I was out all night. And I come home and got a couple of hours sleep, and I woke up in the biggest panic and rang my coach. And I was like, I'm so sorry, coach. I'm late. I'm late. I'll get there as soon as I can. Mate, I don't know why I slept in. Well, I clearly knew why I slept in. But I was like, I don't know why, mate. I'm so sorry. And he goes, Joey. I was like, yeah, mate, I'll be there in a minute. And he goes, mate, we don't have training today. So I had no idea. Just
what day it was.
I had no idea what day it was, mate. Just because I was out of it. And he was like, it's all right, mate. Go back to bed.
Oh, what a relief. That was,
yeah, you'd be like, yes.
Yes, biggest win ever. Celebrate that.
Thank you for sharing. We're just going to hit you up a quick few little rapid fire questions. So there's a little bit of fun. All right, so you have got 5 kids. How do you remember all their names?
I got them tattooed on me.
Oh, yes. I knew you were a smart guy.
That's why I did it. A funny story about that. I think it's George Foreman, ex-boxer, and we know that the research around getting punched in the head isn't particularly good for your head and your memory. George Foreman, I'm pretty sure it's George Foreman, named all his sons George.
That's brilliant.
But how I remember all my kids is the fact that I got them tattooed. How I remember their birth dates, even more so, because I'm useless with numbers, and I'm still woeful with that.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Love that. Okay, who is, in your opinion, is the best Australian sports person?
I would say Anthony Mundine.
Yeah,
nice one.
What's his nickname?
Chock or the man.
The man. Yeah. Yep.
I would say him because of how dominant he was across two sports over many years. But then again, Sonny is obviously not from Australia, but the way I say that Sonny, why I said that Sonny, I believe Sonny is the greatest modern sportsman is because he did it over another sport as well, rugby union. Rugby league, boxing, and rugby union sevens.
And hot. Oh.
And hot.
That too.
What boxing combo packs the biggest punch? What have we got? Flurry.
No, I'm always a believer, and if my kids ever want to box, I'm a believer that you set your fight up with your jab, and your jab's probably you're not as powerful punch, but it's just like flicking someone in the face and just keeping them. Yeah, just keeping them annoyed. Just keeping them in front of their eyes. Just annoying.
Yeah,
just annoying. Boom, boom.
Yeah, it's like a little mozzie buzzing around the head. Jab it out.
100%.
I love that. It's annoying already.
That's great. Might do that to the kids tonight if they get home.
Because you set everything up off that. The big punches come off that one.
Yeah, love that. Smell the cheese. Smell the cheese. Smell the cheese. Smell the cheese.
And finally, who's the most famous person you've met?
Had some pretty good conversations with Russell Crowe when he owned South.
Rusty.
Pretty cool, actually. It was pretty cool.
So cool.
sitting on his yacht. Up in
who
just casually comes out with those conversations. We were sitting on Russell Crowe's yacht. We're actually playing footy in Townsville against the Cowboys, and it was remember the old BlackBerry phones?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Have one.
One and a back, right? So the club got all of our top squad BlackBerries, right, and they were all linked. So then if we needed a group message out, it was sent to the group message. So we were playing in Townsville and we won, and it was a big game, and the mail around was we don't want us to go out. So they were like, oh, we don't want you to go out, we don't want you to get into trouble, all that sort of stuff. And they were like, oh, look, if you're going to go out, just stick together, all of that sort of stuff. And then we all got a text at the same time. Meet down at the marina in X amount of minutes or whatever, or X amount of time. And we're like, did you get that as well? And they're like, yeah, we all got it. So we all sort of got up out of this club and we went down there, and Russ's boat was there. And we got on there, and it was, and he was like, this is why I didn't want you to go out, because I wanted you, if he's going to party, we're all together. But it was some pretty epic conversations like that. And having conversations with him around the fact that he wanted to be a South Sydney player when he was when he got older. He was like
little Rusty.
Yeah, and I played a prominent position. I played halfback, right? And it was like, saying that he wanted to play for South Sydney, and he grew up wanting to be a halfback and all that sort of stuff.
He wanted to be little Joe. Yeah,
I don't know about that, but
so cool.
Just pretty epic. But the other one, I was actually in a restaurant in the US, and it was Gerard Butler.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And he was
He's
in there
sober,
with his,
isn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
He is.
So he was filming a movie at the time in Atlanta, and that's where I was based. And the people I were with, I was like, man, this is Gerard Butler. Like, And they're like, oh, no, like, leave him with his, he's just having his dinner. I was like, I don't care. I'm never going to, like, no one's ever going to believe me that I haven't met him. Go over and meet his crew. And they were, like, just so cool.
Oh.
So cool. And, like, they spin out a bit on our Australian accents and stuff, And then the fact that I played rugby league, and then everyone sort of loves the fact that, oh, my God, you guys don't wear helmets. Stuff like that, So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. The guy who I was with, living and working with over there at the time, is a guy called Kevin Hines. If you don't know Kevin, look up his story. Survivor jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wow.
Yeah, and his stories. Look at the BuzzFeed clip. There's millions of views. The BuzzFeed clip of Kevin, talking about him surviving, jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and how a seal kept him afloat.
Holy
a seal kept bobbing him up to keep him afloat until the Coast Guard got there.
What?
Yeah.
That would be
like stories, absolute bananas.
Wow.
Lucky to travel, more or less live in the same apartment building and travel 35 odd states around the US with him.
What were you doing in America, Joe?
I was doing the same mental health work over there.
Oh,
unreal.
Yeah.
How long were you there?
I was there for a month there, month here for like 6 months. 6 months, 12 months.
So good.
But we were just out for dinner one time just before I come back to Australia. And Gerard Butler walked in and we're like,
also hot.
Yeah.
Got a photo with him. That good, like really good dude. Really good dude.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's what I was like, man, I'm not sitting down here. He might be having his dinner. I'm having my dinner too. Like, I just want a photo with him. That's it. It'll take 30 seconds.
Moment.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unreal. That's so good.
Respectful, of course.
Yeah, of course. And finally, Joe, what would you like to recommend our listeners? So something that's brought you joy, or just something you'd like to recommend them. Can be anything you want.
It's time for the recommendation of the week.
In the trauma space, anything by Dr. Bruce Perry or Gabor Mate. Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah's book, What Happened to You, is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's like so many penny drops. That's why I react like that. That's why I get triggered like that. Like, it breaks it down so much. And then anything, obviously, for our listeners, talking about our old people, the ancestors. There's a brilliant book out at the moment called The Dreaming Path by two beautiful men that I'm lucky to spend a lot of time with out on country. And I actually talk about these two men most days that I'm delivering workshops and stuff in community. That book's called The Dreaming Path. And the two men, Uncle Paul Gordon and Uncle Paul Callaghan, the two who wrote that. I was sitting out on country with Uncle Paul Gordon, and he said, "I love all the work." This was when I was doing the work in the US. So I'd come back, and he's like, "I love all the work that you're doing around the US. I love all the work that you're doing." I was actually in the US, and he was actually at my house because we lived with his nephew, his great nephew, and he said, "Brother, awesome work you're doing over there, but I want to ask you something. Who's got the highest suicide rates in the world?" And I said, "Oh, we do." And he goes, "Well, what are you doing over there?" He's like, "Your people need you here." I was like, wow, like, I'm on the next plane home. And then I was sitting around the fire with him out in Western New South Wales, and he said, "I want to challenge what all those doctors told you. I want to challenge everyone who's always talked to you about your mental health and your mental illness and the conversation that around that." He said, "I don't believe you're mentally ill. I believe you're spiritually ill. It's your spirit that needs fixing. It's your spirit that needs healing, and you can't do that inside the four walls of a doctor's office. You need to get out on country and learn about who you are and learn about country, because country has all the answers." Right? And then the second conversation with Uncle Paul Callaghan, he was like, and I started to implement that, what Uncle Paul Gordon was saying, talking about it's your spirit that's sick, and everything that I did around cultural practice, I was humming, like everything was beautiful. So I realized that I felt good every time I did things that were good for my spirit. And then Uncle Paul Callaghan sat me down and it was around some particular practices and processes that I went through many years ago now. And he said, what you learn out here, the more you implement that into your life, the more you'll realise that your mental health problems will go away. And they're exactly right. Both men talk directly about healing the spirit. Both men talk directly about how the more I learn about myself, the more I connect to the old ways, the more I understand the story and the old stories. Not just, people take for granted the old dreaming stories. The old dreaming stories are what's going to heal the world, right? Bruce Perry talked about it in his book with Oprah Winfrey. He said, how ironic that how ironic that the people that have been most marginalised throughout the world will be the people that the world turns to heal its modern woes. Right, talking about Indigenous peoples all across the world, right? And looking at the more I did with cultural practice, the more I started to learn about the science and research of what trauma is, and the more I learn about how it heals people, and the more I understand that what them old two men are saying is exactly right. And I'll go back to them dreaming stories. Every bird, every plant, every river, everything all has a story. Every mountain, everything has a story. And all of those stories, no matter what it is, all have lessons and all have values. All of those lessons are about what to do in life, what not to do in life, and all the values are around love, care, respect, humility, compassion, and sharing. Every single story right across the country. When I go into communities, they say, it's brilliant, Joe, the work that you do sharing your story. And I said, I don't share my story. I share the old stories. Because the more we live with more compassion in our lives, the more we live with less judgment, the more we live with more respect and love for each other, the more we have more care for country and care for everything with spirit, the more we're going to be well. There's a reason why them old people were here for thousands of years. We've got to start to listen to that, connect to that, and start to learn from it and implement it into our life.
I love this. Come at me with the lessons. I'm like, I'm in. When do I sign up? Where do I start? I want to learn. I want to get out there. I want to get all of that all over me. That's amazing.
Go and connect to the people that are in your communities. Go and connect to the local knowledge holders that have these things, that have these stories, and and I promise you'll hear every single story that every single dreaming story that we have. It's a story about what to do, what not to do, and a story about lessons and values of how you should live your life. The more people live with those lessons and values in our lives, the more we're going to live with more sharing and less greed. The more we're going to live with more empathy and less judgment, and the more we're going to live with more care and less, more love and less hate.
Oh, I love this.
Right? Every community has those local knowledge holders. They're the things that heal our world.
Brilliant.
That's a beautiful recommendation, Joe. And
the dreaming path. That was the book.
The dreaming path.
I will put it in our show notes as well, and I've written it down. It's on my next book to read. I'm a bookworm,
I'm straight on. Yeah,
on it. Joe, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing your story and having those conversations that for some are too difficult to have. I think Mason and I were just sitting here listening, just like I could listen to you all day, Joe.
Saw your head doing backflips for a couple of times.
How do people? People need to watch us on YouTube just to see our brains ticking over. But people can find you via your website, joewilliams.com.au. Yep,
that's the one.
Yep, and also you can buy Joe's book from his website as well. I've just enjoyed this chat immensely, Joe, and I am looking forward to seeing this next, exciting venture that you're going through with your business, and just helping others and educating people and just taking people along for your ride as well. I think you're doing the community a huge service, so thank you.
What we're doing next is about longevity of people. Right? What we're doing next isn't about quick fixes. What we're doing now is about implementing some behavioural change in communities and helping people with the tools to live the best version of themselves.
Incredible. And you've done that, Joe. Like, you're 17 years sober. Like, you've had the insight and the introspection to make the changes in your life. You're a walking, talking example of that. And Yeah, we're just so honoured to have you on the podcast today to share your story and see this longevity. Because we're just, I'm just eating off all your words. I can't wait to re-listen to this and watch you grow as well. And I'll be definitely getting that book. And thank you for sharing everything with us today.
I'll finish with something my sponsor told me in the very early years of sobriety. He said, Joe, I don't care who you are, whether you're a first grade footy player in Sydney, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a bum on the street. I don't care who you are or what you do, whether you're a father, whether you're a brother, a husband, whatever you do without alcohol in your life, you'll be better at it.
Yes. Isn't life just, sobriety is a gift.
The gift that keeps giving, mate.
It really, really is.
The gift that keeps giving.
Oh, couldn't agree with you more. Life just gets so much better without booze in it.
I love all of Gabor Mate's work around addiction. Yeah. He talks so much about the early adversity, just the early chaos in kids' lives, and how in those instances when we're this big, we are building coping strategies mentally, and those coping strategies become bigger coping strategies, and then all of a sudden we won't talk because we're told. This is the thing I have about stigma, right? The thing about stigma is got nothing to do with people not wanting to talk. It's got everything to do with the fact that we were silenced as little kids, and subconsciously we feel that we can't talk, right? Because every time we showed and shared emotions, actually leave this in. Every time we showed and shared emotions, we were told to be quiet. We were told to get in our room. We were told to stop crying, stop being a sook. Right, so subconsciously we start trying to push those emotions down. So we're not showing vulnerability in front of our mum and in front of our dad, in front of our carers. We're subconsciously pushing those down, and then at 6, 7, and 8, we're then getting stronger at doing that and hiding the emotion from our parents. And then at 14, 15, 16, what's the first thing you think we'll do to silence the emotions? Get completely obliterated on the weekend. Right, and then as parents, we go when we're losing and when people are having challenging conversations. Why won't my kids talk about this? Yeah, and I'm not pointing the finger at parents because it's everything that they were taught as well. Is that we're continuously saying to our kids, "Shut up, stop crying. That didn't hurt. Stop being a sook." Yeah, all of that subconsciously is stored within our body, in our mechanics of who we are, right? And then we struggle at 15, 16, and 40-year-old to talk about emotions because our nervous system is holding on to everything, telling us not to do it because once we weren't allowed to do it, and it's so hard to unwire that sort of stuff. That it's not actually about not wanting to tell people that we're doing it tough. It's not actually about that. It's actually everything about subconsciously being silenced in the early years of our life. Hit me like a rock between the eyes, because that's everything I did with my kids in the early age. Right, but then now. Again, the difference between what I learnt then and what I learnt now, or what I knew then and what I know now, is that you got to come to a place of trying to hold and foster vulnerability when people who are having challenging times. Because all they're trying to do is explain the fact that they're having a challenging time in the environment.
And that's what you've done here on the podcast too, Joe, is your vulnerability, as we say, it gives people permission to be vulnerable when you can talk about your stuff so easily. So, you'll be unlocking, I'm sure, freeing people up to be able to have those conversations. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe.
I could talk for hours. I'll talk too much sometimes.
So we could listen. I'm like, could Joe be my therapist? I know. I just think you've got, really, really great advice. And just, I think the knowledge that you've shared today, it is going to unlock things for people. So we appreciate it.
You found your purpose and your why.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, the two most important days of your life, the day you're born, then the day you find out why you're born.
Mm.
I thought it was about sport for so long.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no doubt in the world it's about helping people to be the best version of themselves.
And you're doing that.
It. Yeah, you're doing
Yes. Thanks, Joe.
This podcast is proudly produced by our audio engineer, music extraordinaire, Eric Ladd.
We love you, Eric.